What happens when one man tries to watch all of the horror films of the 1980s? We're about to find out because I'm your host, Josh Spiegel, and this is the 80s Project. On this episode of the 80s Project, we're almost there. This is the second to last episode of 1980 before we move on to 1981. And this has been a pretty interesting year so far. We're definitely feeling that 70s vibe fade away and those 1980s tropes start to come forward, and it's been kind of fun to see. And I know we've got some pretty interesting stuff in this block, so let's just jump right into it. We're starting this block with Hell of the Living Dead, or Night of the Zombies, which played Spain on November 10th. It played Italy a year later in 81 and reached the States in 83. Now, I know that I covered this recently in my Romero ripoff video, but it's worth watching twice. It starts off with another staple of 80s flicks, the leak at a chemical plant during an operation called Operation Sweet Death. And I wonder if it's like, sweet death, how I long for your embrace. Or like, dude, sweet death. This was directed by Bruno Mattei under the pseudonym of Vincent Dawn, and it's his first appearance on the project, but certainly won't be his last. And he's most known for doing cheap knockoffs of established hit films. And this is one of those, and you can tell right off the bat because the film uses the score from Dawn of the Dead. They actually hired Goblin to do the music, but couldn't afford for them to write new tunes, so the band was just like, here, use these songs from this other famous zombie film. The accident causes zombies instead of just, cancer, and then there's a police squad surrounding a group of criminals in a tenement, and these are those SWAT guys. So yeah, pretty clear why this would have been on that Romero ripoff list. What happens here is that a group of Italian producers saw Dawn and said, we want a movie just like that, and they hired Mattei to do exactly that. They brought on Claudio Fragasso, infamous Troll 2 director, to write the screenplay. And it seems that there was actually two different ones in consideration. Mattei really wanted one of them and disliked the other, so guess which one the producers ran with. Most of the film takes place in New Guinea, where the chemical plant was located, and a group of journalists attempt to figure out what happened, and the commando group tries to help them, while at the same time ensuring that they don't actually find anything out. Of course, zombie shenanigans ensue with possibly the least threatening zombies ever. Like, look at this. There's like 6 zombies basically on top of this guy and all around him, and he very, very easily escapes. Later, that same guy is surrounded again, and again they can't touch him. Plus, can I get a special shout out for this extra who I guess they didn't have time to paint his neck and just thinks that walking like a zombie means that like your wrists are broken. My rating on this one is a 3.5. I know that it bogs down in the middle a bit and it gets a bit dull, but there's just so much fun, silly stuff going on in between that I really enjoy watching it. What can I say? I am a sucker for cheap Italian zombies. Its horror cultural significance is a 2.5 since it's pretty memorable and was a staple of video stores back in the day, but it never quite reached the heights that some of its cohorts did. Should you watch it? Yep, no question. Oh boy, on November 14th, a legend was born with the Boogeyman from Uli Lommel. And watching this one, we're gonna play How Many Movies Can We Rip Off? It starts with a vaguely Halloween theme song. and then has a couple getting steamy with a pantyhose mask. Son, you've got a panty on your head. Young Willie and Lacey are spying on them, so they tie Willie to his bed, which is, yeah, maybe a bit extreme. But Lacey lets him go, and he, let's see if this is familiar, takes a knife in a POV shot and then stabs his mother's lover in front of a big mirror. It then bounces 20 years, and Lacey and Willie live on a farm, and he hasn't spoken since that night, and they get a letter from their mom saying that she's on her deathbed and wants to see them one last time. And the pair are actually played by Susanna Love and Nicholas Love, real-life brother and sister, and Susanna was married to Lommel and co-wrote the screenplay for the film. Oh, and then, great, look at these windows. So now we've got Halloween and Amityville going on, and Lacey is haunted by nightmares of a killer. So they consult a psychiatrist, and come on, if your head doctor is freaking John Carradine, it might be time to seek a second opinion. I mean, I guess it doesn't matter what you do, just don't do this. She decides to confront her fears by going back to the house she grew up in, where they encounter Timmy.
Boogeyman! Timmy!
And there's that mirror here, which she shatters, causing Jake to make her take it home with them, where he patches it up because, you know, what's a better addition to your household decor than a shattered mirror? Spooky stuff starts happening, prompted by the shard of mirror remaining, and the movie becomes a sort of stalker film, sort of possession film, and even though it received pretty negative reviews at the time of release, it was a decent sized hit. Made for less than $500,000, it would bring in $25 million at the box office. But unfortunately, because the distribution company was going through bankruptcy at the time, Lommel and the rest of the crew saw very little of the proceeds. Oh, and going back a bit, this actress right here is Jane Pratt, and after this movie, she acted in a couple of other little bit parts and then quit acting and decided to go into magazines, creating Sassy and Jane, named after herself, and is currently featured as Jane Radio on Sirius XM. The ending goes totally off the rails and goes into Exorcist territory. And features Jake, I guess, sort of crucified by kitchen drawers that, I mean, he can clearly just let go of. And we're back to Amityville again. Fine. My rating on this one is a 3. I like it and I don't. It's like there's a handful of scenes that are absolutely amazing and perplexing that I love, but in between them, it's a bit of a bore. Its HCS is a 2.5. It is pretty remembered, even if it's taken on a cult status, but it was enough to form a really wonky franchise, which we'll get to later in the project. Should you watch it? Yeah, I would. It's fun, even though there's a few points that you'll be looking at your watch.
Boogeyman!
Well, I was looking forward to this because on the same day, Alligator was released. In the wake of Jaws, there was lots of giant animal attack movies, and this is easily one of the best. It starts with a young girl getting a pet baby alligator in 1968, and her dad flushes it down the toilet, just like all those old urban legends. It then jumps 12 years, and the amazing late Robert Forster is here, as is Mr. Frome, and Detective Madison is investigating a series of animal deaths. And Michael Gazzo is here, and listen to this man's voice.
I haven't decomposed a bit, but all the internal organs have been cut out. Clean as a whistle. Larynx cords cut too.
The voice of an angel. So Pet Shop Guy is providing a lab, doing tests on animals with stray dogs and helping them dispose of their failures in the sewer. That baby alligator has been feeding on them and has been making it grow to massive size, and it starts chomping. So this was directed by Louis Teague, who also made Cujo and Cat's Eye, and then blessed the world with the weirdest, goofy sequel in The Jewel of the Nile. Our first view of the big guy is pretty impressive, although reportedly the animatronic gator, much like Bruce the Shark from Jaws, was a little difficult to work with and didn't quite operate the way that it was supposed to. And then, the film brings in the always stunning Robin Riker in her debut film. And if you happened to miss it, I did a timeline video about the two Alligator films a while back and talked to Ms. Riker about the movie, and she was fantastic and gave some great behind the scenes stories. It definitely fits a Jaws pattern, from having a police guy who no one believes at first but then end up backing, paired with a younger, more science-oriented cohort, to a sort of grizzled hunter out to get the creature, but it's also 100% its own thing. Its own thing with awesome giant alligator effects, from that big animatronic to using a real gator on shrunken sets. This is also actually written by the legendary John Sayles, who also wrote Piranha and The Howling, but would go on to be nominated for multiple Oscars for writing, winning the BAFTA award, and also directing several extremely critically acclaimed films. It features some standout moments in the later half, like a particularly shocking moment with a small child in a swimming pool, Gazzo almost having an aneurysm.
Enough as they are! Look, just let me know when the state troopers are ready. Damn it!
And the outstanding wedding sequence, which is just full-on, non-stop monster goodness. My rating here is a 4. I love this. It's a great movie. Kinda simple and straightforward and clearly influenced by one giant shark film, but I could watch it at any time, and that pool scene scarred young me. Its HCS is a 3, since it's fairly fondly remembered, even on a cult level, but has some great effects, top-notch stars, and is both written and directed by strong talent in the horror field. I'd give it higher, but I still feel like it's not as recognized as it deserves to be. Should you watch it? Yes, tonight. A few days later, on November 18th, in Italy, there was Erotic Nights of the Living Dead. And I was a little hesitant to include it here because it's pretty much just an X-rated film with some horror elements, but after weighing it out, I figured it deserved inclusion. The main reason why is that it's from Joe D'Amato, and even though it's only the first year of the 80s project, this is his 3rd film on here. Previous D'Amato entries were Sex and Black Magic and Anthropophagus. Like a lot of his films, it features George Eastman, who also wrote this one, and John here is buying an island to put a new resort on. But there's neck-chomping zombies afoot, and even the mention of the island is enough to send prostitutes running without getting paid. And if you were not convinced that this is a world of X-rated logic,
you're just the type of man to suit a woman. No clothes and a big wad already.
Not to mention a couple of chilled bottles of champagne.
Give me time for a quick shower and I'll be with you.
zombie attacks start increasing and John hires Larry to take him to the island, and holy crap, this is a half hour in and not much has happened. Although a woman uses her private parts to open a bottle of champagne, so I guess that's something. Loris Gemser is here, and she's most known for playing Black Emmanuelle, and this one was filmed at the same time as Porno Holocaust, another D'Amato film, and they both have the same cast and locations, and I suppose I'll get to that in the 1981 episodes. But this one was pretty unsuccessful, which saddened the director quite a bit. This was his first attempt to really lead into the horror stuff in one of his X-rated ventures, and he was hoping it would be embraced. But afterwards, called it a total fiasco. It seems to live in the shadow of its twin, probably due to that one's more blatant title, and it's kind of plain to see why this was considered a fiasco, since it's just a long chain of people walking around, standing around, sitting around, and having sex around, but not like appealing or even erotic sexing around. My rating on this one is 1 tape. Who knew that you can combine sex with zombies and still end up with something you can fall asleep to? There's like 3 fun things going on in the whole film. Its HCS is just a 1.5 since it's still a little bit of a forgotten D'Amato entry, again overshadowed by Porno Holocaust, and doesn't offer much new. Should you watch it? It's a pass. One day later, on November 19th, was Mama Dracula, an obscure little number from Belgium. It starts with a history of a Lady Bathory-like character and a professor who's given an invite from Countess Dracula, and once the Statue of Liberty grows fangs, it's pretty clear that this is going to be leaning into the humor. He heads to Transylvania to meet her, and I guess I should mention that his name is Professor Von Blood, and he thinks he's going to a blood conference, so I guess he was like, well, guess I should just do what my name is, which is not really the best way to pick a career. The Countess is Nurse Ratched, kind of playing against type here, and I'm kind of thinking that Thomas Dolby saw this movie and was like, yeah, I want to go for that guy's look. These vamps can walk around in the daylight, and she bathes in her victim's blood in order to retain her youthful appearance. But it's important that the blood be from a virgin, and she's having trouble finding those. But like, maybe she should just go hunt down young Jim Carrey or something. Garlic also has no effect, and she's asking the professor to find a way to synthesize that blood to mass produce it for her. And she has this pair of twin assistants who are mainly there as comic relief, and they help to collect girls for the Countess, and they pull a joke from Love at First Bite, but I guess reverse it? There's also an inspector trying to figure out the rash of disappearances in the area, and when they find their ideal candidate, she tries to get the professor to help her, and the script on this one was partially written by National Lampoon's Tony Hendra, who most people remember as the paddle-carrying manager from Spinal Tap, and this was pretty ignored at the time of release and kind of slipped into obscurity. My rating on this one is just a 2. It has some amusing bits and there's some stuff that is entertaining, but for the most part it's kind of boring and not a whole lot happens and poorly staged. It's not great. Its HCS is only a 1 because again, it is completely forgotten. This is one of the more obscure films of this particular era, especially considering that it has some stars in it and doesn't really offer a lot of new to the genre. Should you watch it? You could probably pass. Well, from one horror comedy to another, because now we're going to November 21st with The Private Eyes. It begins with a 1920s setting as a wealthy couple is murdered in their car by an unseen figure. We're introduced to Mr. Furley and Ensign Parker as a couple of Scotland Yard detectives that have a bit of a bad reputation, and they're put on a murder case and head up to the Morley house. They're met by Bernard Fox, who actually played Watson himself once, and Sarah Palmer, and for some reason, they have a gun that will go off every hour unless they turn it off, and yeah, I'm not sure that's a good invention at all. Phyllis here is the sole heir to their fortune, but if she dies, the money is split amongst the staff, which includes Irwin Keyes, and everyone seems pretty suspicious. They start getting killed off one by one, eliminating the pool of suspects in a variety of pretty bloodless manner. And if you had HBO at like any point in the 80s, you've probably seen this one. Conway and Knotts had previously teamed up on the Apple Dumpling Gang films, as well as a movie called Gus, and this would be the final time that they appeared together outside of little cameos. It was directed by Lang Elliott, and most everything that he worked on was in tandem with Conway, from a couple of feature films to the Dorf video series. Weirdly, he doesn't have any credits since the 90s, but is listed as working on a remake of Cujo called Cujo Canine Unit Joint Operations. There hasn't been any news on that since like 2015, so it's probably not happening, and I really want to know what happened here. There's a running joke that the killer leaves poems that purposely don't rhyme, and when they read this one...
If Jacques could talk, he'd give you a clue. But now that he's dead, what can you do? He deserved what he got, I don't regret it a bit. By the way, you're standing in Bull Caca.
Like, that line is clearly overdubbed, but like it's clear that he didn't curse since it would have rhymed and ruined the joke. But if you look at his lips, it looks like that's what he actually says. So, did they have to dub it to avoid a higher MPAA rating? But then the joke doesn't work.
By the way, you're standing in Bull Caca.
There's actually kind of a wild story here since the film was shot in an actual mansion that had a collection of rare books. When they found one missing after showing it to Conway, he was actually accused of stealing it, and their subsequent investigation revealed that a former security guard there had stolen around 60 rare books from their library, and the film's production revealed his scheme. All in all, it was actually a pretty profitable film and was the highest grossing film released under Roger Corman's New World Pictures banner. My rating on it is a 3.5. It is a lot of fun. A simple story with dated humor, sure, but it's family friendly and silly and gave me a nice nostalgic kick. Its significance is lower in terms of horror since it's like 80% comedy, so I'm just giving it a 2, and that 2 is for the presence of classic comedy stars and an old-fashioned murder in a big spooky mansion, and the fact that there was no way to escape this film if you had cable in the 80s. Should you watch it? I mean, yeah, but if you're in a horror mood, probably no.
Listen up, dummies. The help is all gone. The house is bare. Now you know a shadow lives there. There is one left to die. Then my job will be done. I like killing people. It's a lot of kicks.
As far away as possible from that film, in tone and distance, we go to Hong Kong for November 26th's Lost Souls, which is often described as China's most disturbing film. But like, have they seen Human Centipede 3? It opens with a group of immigrants sneaking across the border from mainland China into Hong Kong looking for a better life. When some of their group gets busted and brought in, they seek refuge from a man on a nearby farm, but he actually sells them off. And hey, there's a character named Shang Tung, and now I'm wondering if some beast with 6 arms is gonna come strolling out. After trying to escape, they end up in the clutches of a gang who are a particularly nasty bunch who take their captives and abuse and torture them. And this was produced by the Shaw Brothers, legendary kung fu movie studio. And you can bet the sound effects are all pretty familiar. This was directed by Tun Fei Mao, who would later make the equally notorious Man Behind the Sun, another movie that's basically about torturing prisoners, so dude has a theme going on. These proceedings include people being burned alive, being urinated on, and honestly, most of the torture isn't like Saw variety or anything. You're not going to see people having parts cut off, and honestly, I have to keep this synopsis short because there's not really a lot of clips that I can even use from the film due to the sheer level of non-stop naked people. My rating on it is a 1. It's terrible. It's not shocking. It's not interesting. It's just dull and trash. This HCS is also a 1. No one knows what it is, and I'm kinda sorry that now more people do because of this video. Should you watch it? No. In fact, forget I mentioned it. On November 28th, we go back to the US, but we're headed to the small screen for The Babysitter. I don't include a lot of TV movies on the project, but this looked fun, so here it is. It's got a little Tara here, and her mom needs a miracle worker, and her dad looks suspiciously like Michael Myers for some reason. They've recently moved, and Tara meets their neighbor Joanna, played by Stephanie Zimbalist, who just appeared in the last episode's The Awakening, and she has a penchant for standing in the middle of the road. And then the great John Houseman shows up as the local doctor, so the cast list on this is pretty solid. They hire Joanna to be their live-in babysitter and housekeeper, and she sparks the cray-cray pretty soon, talking to invisible people, and secrets are revealed as Liz confides in her, and Jeff is revealed to be having an affair. This ran as an ABC Friday night movie, and I mainly put it on here because it was directed by Peter Medak, and earlier in this year, he gave us the great ghost story, The Changeling. And he's actually still working, directing at around 85 years old, although mainly just does TV episodes nowadays. When this aired for the first time, it actually got crushed in the ratings, but it was up against two of the most popular shows at the time, Dallas and the Dukes of Hazzard. Things start to escalate as Joanna tries to work her way into their lives and shows some violent tendencies. Although, before you can say Alicia Silverstone, one of the plot points is that she's hopelessly enamored with William Shatner, which I'm sure he loved. It may take a little while, but after the first hour, it starts to kick in with a bit more insanity until it goes full-on Fatal Attraction for the finale. My rating on it is a 2.5 because it's definitely watchable and has some moments, but it's no Changeling. Its significance is a 2 because it's only a TV movie and it's not really remembered, but I'll give it a touch of extra cred for being by Medak and featuring the Shat and Duke plus Houseman and giving us a sort of prototype for Glenn Close's rabbit shenanigans. Should you watch it? Possibly. I think it's one that I wouldn't turn off if it were on, but wouldn't choose to turn it on, if that makes sense.
And I can't do it anymore.
We now head into December, and on the 3rd, in Spain, The Beast's Carnival was released. The opening introduces us to Bruno here, but we don't just meet him. We get this really handy exposition dump that literally explains his entire character in 10 seconds.
You're the mercenary who fought in Rhodesia, in Angola, in Vietnam. I know you're the best in the world at what you do, and with a gun no one can beat you. I know you're a true professional. And that, Bruno, is why the organization I belong to needs you.
And Bruno is played by Paul Naschy, who wrote and directed the film as well, and somehow, I don't know how this happened, but I have never featured any of his films on the channel, but that's about to change. He was most known for a series of films referred to as the Hombre Lobo series, of which there's 12 movies, but one of those is now lost, so I guess there's only 11. And this is not part of that series, and has Bruno, a hitman, taking a job with the Yakuza to steal a bunch of diamonds, but then, unexpectedly, double-crosses them and takes them for himself. He heads up into the mountains to hide with a group of assassins on his tail, and even though Naschy's Spanish, and this was a Spanish production, it was made in conjunction with Japan. So it features a Japanese heavy subplot and actors. The first half hour of this one basically just feels like an action heist movie of sorts, and you're wondering where it's going or if this is even horror. But then Bruno ends up in the care of a family of pig farmers who appear to have some ulterior motives, and when more people come looking for him, someone seems to be doing some killing of their own. There's also some good old love triangle stuff going on because when you're writing and directing the movie, of course you make it a subplot in which the female characters just can't keep their hands off of you. The weird aspect of this film is that even though it was a joint production with Japan, the film was never actually screened there, and the horror elements really start to kick in the final act, even if it takes a bit to get there. But the longer it goes on, the wilder it gets.
An Oriental woman. I'm afraid I don't know who she was because they all look the same to me.
Jesus, movie. My rating on this is a 2.5. I want to give it a 3, but I just can't. It starts off so strong and has some weird fun, and I want to be on board, but it just takes way too long to get where it's going and has too many pointless plot threads that don't really pay off. Its HCS is a 1.5 because Naschy is already a bit of a cult filmmaker, and this is one of his lesser known entries that I don't even see his fans discussing. Should you watch it? I mean, if you've never seen a Naschy film, I don't think this is the place to start. but if you like his style, it's worth a watch.
Yes, what a nerve! Why, how dare you? I can't even breathe hardly.
Yeah, I smelled you sweating all night long, you cow. I almost lost my food.
2 days later in West Germany, Devil Hunter was released, but it didn't get an Italian run until later in '81 and was released in the US as Manhunter. And it has this Baywatch looking model here, and I guess I promised / threatened this one like 2 episodes back, since this is also by Jess Franco and was made back to back with White Cannibal Queen. So when Laura is kidnapped, they take her to a remote jungle lair where they hold her for ransom. And Al Cliver of Zombie and Beyond fame is here, and he was also in White Cannibal Queen, and he's hired by Laura's people to go and save her. But there's a tribe of cannibals there that worship a devil god with crazy eyes that are basically just cut out ping pong balls. And you know I'm saying right now that if, when I decided to do the 80s project, if I had realized that I'd be stuck watching like 75 boring cannibal movies, I might have said no thank you. When their rescue attempt goes wrong, Laura ends up alone in the jungle, hunted by the kidnappers and the cannibal creature. And even though this film is by Franco, he's credited as Clifford Brown. Although it's reported to have been co-directed by Lina Romay, a Spanish actress that also appeared in White Cannibal Queen and quite a few other films. She had recently become involved with Franco, who was in the middle of divorcing his first wife, who actually edited this movie, so I'm sure that there was some interesting dynamics there.
The ones from the helicopter?
I know it's you on the other end of this walkie-talkie, Wesson. What the hell do you want from me?
I'm pretty sure it's a surprise to you, but it's me, Peter Weston.
He literally just said he knew it was you when he answered. Clearly not a surprise. After Laura gets taken in by the cannibals, everyone is against each other, and I have to say, as compared to White Cannibal Queen and probably 90% of the other cannibal films of this era, there's stuff going on here. It's not overwhelmingly interesting stuff, but it's stuff. Upon release, like many of the other man-eating films, it was placed on the UK Video Nasty List and banned there, not seeing release in that country until 2008 in uncut form. My rating on it is a 2 because although it's better than most of the other cannibal flicks, it's still not that great. It has a couple of fun moments, but not much else. Its significance is also low at a 1.5 because again, not a really known film, one of Franco's lesser entries and one of the more forgotten of the cannibals. Should you watch it? I'd pass.
Get me out of here! I can't get these dreadful memories out of my head!
Calm down. Come on, you must control yourself.
Wait a minute. Let me take a pill.
Okay.
That'll be better. It'll steady my nerves.
Our last movie in this block is a doozy, and it's Nightmare City, which debuted on November 11th in Italy. And remember how Fulci's Zombie starts with a mysterious ship pulling into a harbor, and there's zombies on board? Well, this one starts off with a mysterious airplane landing, and guess what? Guess what's on board? Well, if you said zombies, you're mostly right. These are referred to by the director as not being zombies and instead are irradiated people who look like zombies and, like zombies, can't easily be killed and are interested in chowing down on you, so I don't know what to tell you. They're zombies. Unlike the ghouls you're thinking about though, these ones use weapons, including guns, and are quite fast. And that's this film's biggest contribution to the horror genre. This is the first running zombie film. Outside of Romero zombies showing tiny spurts of speed here and there, this is the official first film in which running zombies are a thing. They start expanding their attacks all over, and this one was directed by Umberto Lanzi, who had also directed Eaten Alive, which I covered earlier this year on the project, and this is about as different a movie as can be from that one, and we'll definitely be seeing more of him in the future as well. He's the one that insists that this not be called a zombie movie and prefers it to be a statement about radiation sickness and an anti-military and nuclear film. He would actually become pretty agitated and angry when it would be referred to as a zombie movie. Pretty soon, chaos is erupting everywhere, turning it into some sort of Nightmare City. It's a stretch, but it's in the title. This one actually didn't get a release until 1983 in the States, and it was retitled City of the Walking Dead, which is pretty funny since Fulci's City of the Living Dead got retitled to Gates of Hell over here. So you've got some weird title confusion with 2 movies and 4 titles, 2 of which are strangely similar. Also of note is the ending of this one, for 2 reasons. First off, there's a really great set piece with an amusement park and zombies climbing up a roller coaster, and a helicopter escape that's both pretty wild and features one of my favorite dummy drops of all time. But also, it's all a dream. But it's not just a dream. And that's it. No, it actually just goes right back to the beginning of the movie and replays the freaking opening of the film, like all of it. And supposedly, this was because they didn't know how to end the film and didn't really have the budget for anything else. My rating on this one is 3.5 stars. I kind of love it, but I realize I love the beginning and I love the end, but there's a good solid chunk of this movie that's pretty slow going. Its HCS is a 4 though, because what else can I say? Radiation quibbling aside, this is the first fast zombie movie. Should you watch it? Yeah, it may drag a bit here and there, but that doesn't really hurt it too much in the long run. So there you have it, winding down this year, dipping into December of 1980. We're getting close to the finale of this year, which will be on the very next episode. And my favorite movie of this block is pretty easily Alligator. I'm a sucker for giant monster movies. It's just, you know, just part of who I am, I guess. I'd say Nightmare City is probably a close second in terms of how much I enjoy watching them. But it's all about that Alligator. All about it. Let me know down below, what is your favorite from this block? Which one did you love? I want to hear that. As always, please click the like button on this, subscribe to the channel to get more 80s Project coming your way, and check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support the 80s Project and all of the other movies that we've got coming, because there's lots more to come. We've only begun this decade. In watching all of the movies on the 80s Project.